Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Shane Flint Outdoors. Today we're not out fishing, we're on the back porch here at my house, and I thought today I'd take the time to talk about something that I've been scratching my head about for a long time and provide some recommendations slash my opinion, if you will, on something that every fisherman probably has an opinion on. That's fishing line. And I've got all kinds of fishing line, and what sparked this conversation with me is these were all on my workbench. And I've been using all of these lines on all of my rods and reels, and I carry 8 rods and reels in a boat. And sometimes I think, is my line working for me? Why am I using this line? And what's the best line? So today I thought I'd talk about some of the lines that I've been using on my rods and reels, and talk about some of the line that I've been using for years and years and years on my rod and reels. But everyone has their opinion. And everyone has their favorite. So this is just my opinion. This is my thoughts on the fishing line that I've been using over the past few years primarily. But then I'll talk about some of the line I've been using up to the last 45 years. I mean, I've been using one line for a long time. But primarily you got several different types of line that people use today. Let's kind of get into that. You have monofilament, which has been around ever since I was a kid, right? Ever since I was born, we were using mono. And mono is a staple. People have been using it. I use it today. It's a really good line. Then you got fluorocarbon line, which is a very clear line that's supposedly invisible under the water. You can't see fluorocarbon supposedly. Then you have braid, which is really tough, and I got some braid right here, which I have straightened out some hooks trying to pull a hook off a log with braid. You can't break it. It's really tough to break. Then you have another line that I've been actually using quite a bit, called a copolymer. The copolymer is basically, and this is not a science class here, but copolymer is basically a blend of a mono type material, monofilament type material, with a fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon. So it's got the clearness of a fluorocarbon, but has a little bit of stretch with that a monofilament might have, and the toughness, if you will, of a monofilament. So of all those categories, every one of them have their advantages and disadvantages. So let's start with fluorocarbon. Right, I've got several different versions of fluorocarbon here. I have the trilene. Let me get my glasses on. I have the trilene. This is 100% super strong trilene fluorocarbon. I was using this last year, and as you can see, this spool has not been opened. It's a 12-pound test, and I didn't really like this line, and I'll tell you why. It says it's super abrasion resistant. It broke on me several times last year. I was using a 14-pound test line, and I was using it for Texas rig worm fishing, and it didn't really work. But it is really clear. And I'll tell you, the other thing that I found was it's really stiff. This version was really stiff. It didn't hold any memory, which sometimes is good, but I wasn't really happy with the stiffness of the line. The clearness worked, but I got quite a bit of breaks, and the breaks, that when you break your line, you lose fish. Same with the Vanish. Now I will tell you, the Vanish line, I broke at the knot. I would get the line after I set the hook, and I remember 2 times specifically back to back, I set the hook on it. I don't know how big the bass were, but probably 2 or 3 pounds. And the line broke at the knot, and I tie a double polymer knot, same as a single but with an extra twist. I've showed it on before, but it broke at the knot. 2 consecutive back-to-back times it broke on me on the knot. Again, it's crystal clear. You can't see it, but I wasn't very happy with the line strength at the knot with this Vanish, and that was just my experience, right? Some people love this stuff. Some people love this 100% trilene. The other thing that's an advantage with these lines is that not only are they clear, they have a smaller diameter than monofilament. Not a smaller diameter than braid, but a monofilament. So they're a little bit smaller in diameter, and that's what I liked. I could get more reel on my spool, especially on my spinning rods. But so they're a little bit smaller diameter. You can't see them, and that's what fluorocarbon does. But from my experience, it does break. The tensile strength of it, I don't know what the difference is. There's not much stretch. Monofilament gives you stretch. You don't get much stretch with 100% fluorocarbon. So that was my experience with fluorocarbon, or the 100% fluorocarbon. You know, another line that I use quite a bit up until recently is, you know, the braided. This is a Suffix super line that I got here, and you can see it's the green braid. Again, really tough stuff. This is a 40-pound test braid, and I bet it is more of a 6-pound diameter. Let's look here. Let's compare it. An 8-pound Vanish fluorocarbon is 0.25 millimeters. This 40-pound braid is 0.33 millimeters. So more along the lines of a 10-pound test line. 12-pound test line. The size of 12-pound test line, but the strength of 40 pounds. So it's really strong, very abrasive resistant. It is tough. And the reason I've taken it off my lines, it's too tough. I don't like breaking my line, don't get me wrong, but I straighten out a lot of hooks with this, and especially worm fishing, a lot of people use this in this combination. They use your braided line, and then they'll put a 100% fluorocarbon tip or a copolymer tip on it, or a leader. So they'll tie an FG knot, I think is what it's called. They'll put a leader with fluorocarbon or whatever other line, because this is not low vis. I mean, this dark green, I don't know if you can see it there, and I'm sure you've seen it before. It's not low vis, but if you put a 10, 12 foot fluorocarbon leader, you get the advantages of the strength of the braid not breaking, and then you have the low visibility of the fluorocarbon at your bait, at the end of the bait, and that's where you need it at. And I haven't messed with that much. I kind of old school and just spool my spool with straight up whatever I'm using. When I really do like to use this is when I'm fishing in lily pads and heavy vegetation, top water. This stuff, you can rip right through that heavy vegetation. And there's a place down the road here that I'll be fishing soon called, it's on the not the Chesapeake, but on the Potomac River chain, Copolymers Bay. Is loaded with lily pads, and you can guarantee I'll have this on because it'll rip right through those lily pads. Really good in heavy vegetation. That's when I'll throw this on my spool. But it can be hard on equipment too, in a sense of when you're pulling and you're getting hung up. You got to be careful. You can break your. Sometimes I've heard the stories of people breaking poles before this line would break. So for some reason, if you get it hung up, just be very careful with it. But it is super strong. It has its use. For me, I like to use it, like I said, in heavy vegetation. A lot of folks, like my best friend Gary, he swears by this, and he puts a fluorocarbon leader on this and loves it. So it has its place. It's a good, strong line. Right now, I have it on none of my lines, but I will on none of my poles. But I will go to it, like I said, when I go fish heavy vegetation. Another line that I have really went to lately is the Copolymers. So this is the Suffix Advantage. It's a hyper copolymer, and they call it an advanced monofilament. It has the advantages of mono, which means a little bit of stretch, and it also has the advantages of the fluorocarbon, which is low visibility. I really like it. It does have a good abrasion resistance, not just this version, but this is what I really have been using primarily on most of my rods, is the Yozuri version. It's called the Yozuri Top Knot Mainline, 100% super fluorocarbon. It is a copolymer. I've had really good luck with this line, and I do have the Suffix, And I've fished this on my spinnerbait rods this year, and you've seen in some of my videos, I fish a lot of spinnerbait. So I get that flexibility of the monofilament side plus the low visibility, and I really like it. It sinks, by the way. I didn't say this, but Braid floats. This stuff sinks, and so does your 100% fluorocarbon sinks. This is a smaller diameter than regular monofilament. So this is a 12-pound monofilament, and it's 0.35 millimeter. Here's a regular mono, and it is same thing at 0.38. So it has a smaller diameter, it has the stretch of mono, has the low vis, and you can get in any type of brand. I've got Suffix here that I've used. I actually have tried out this P-Line FluoroClear. It's a fluorocarbon coated type of monofilament. I'm very happy with that. It works really well. I'm using that on my topwater pole right now. Don't need it on my topwater, but that's just what was on the spool. But I've been primarily using this Yozuri top knot. Now, what you have to take in consideration is the price. If you're thinking about how much you pay for line, you're going to pay a lot for 100% fluorocarbon, right? It's very expensive. You're going to pay quite a bit for Braid. It's pretty expensive as well. But the Copolymers are kind of in the middle. They're between, I think this 200 yards of Yozuri top knot is $18.99, and I want to say you can get upwards of $40 or more for 200 yards of fluorocarbon. P-Line, and the reason I went to P-Line, it was recommended to me. It's got really good knot strength. It's really castable, and it's a little less expensive. I think this 600 yards of this P-Line was the same as the Yozuri 200 yards, 16, 18 bucks. So can't remember exactly the price, but I know I got more line with P-Line than I did with Yozuri. And I haven't had any issues with the P-Line. Haven't had many issues or no issues with Yozuri. If you watched a couple of my last fishing videos, there's a couple that's going to be coming out where I did break my line, 8-pound test line on my medium light rods, but I grabbed the line and the fish, bounced and it broke. But that's my fault. That's not the line's fault. And I also had one break on setting the hook. My fault. I knew I should have retied that line versus just kept on throwing with it. And that's the key. That's one of the keys with any line. With the exception of Braid, I guess Braid can break, but all these lines will break. If you don't retie when you need to retie, you gotta pay attention to your line. One little nick, and you get that one big bass on there, and he'll break you off. And it'll be a heartbreak. It's a heartbreak every time I lose a good fish. Any fish. So you always got to check your line. You'll see me several times run my finger down my line checking to see if there's a nick or a scrape, especially if you're fishing in brush or heavy cover. But the one line that I haven't talked about yet is a staple of mine, and that's monofilament. And I still use mono to this day. I use mono on my crankbait poles. And I still use either, if I got one here, I should have one. Yeah, right here. This is the fishing line that I remember my whole life growing up, the old Trilene XT. XT stands for extra chuck, and XL standard for extra light, meaning it was for more castable. This is a staple. I switched to Trilene Big Game when that came out, probably 30 years ago. Maybe 30 years ago, yeah, I don't know, maybe even longer than that. Basically, it's Trilene XT. You can get it in a bigger spool, but this is on my crankbait poles today. I just like mono on my cranking rods. I like that flexibility with the crankbait, and that's what I use today. Price-wise, this whole spool there's 900 yards of line here, and this is 15-pound test. 900 yards, $6.99. All right, is it as tough as the copolymers? No. The disadvantage of mono, it does have memory, meaning when you leave it on the spool so long, you'll notice if it's been on the spool too long, when you cast out there, you'll see loops in your line. All right, especially on a bait caster. it does have memory. So you have to change out mono more often than you have to change out some of these other lines. So when it comes to castability of any of these, of all the lines, I would say the copolymers have the best castability on spinning rods, and I think also on bait casters. Your monofilament's really good, but you do have to change it out. Like I said, it has memory. With the braid, I had some issues. What I don't like with braid is I don't like throwing braid on spinning reels, because sometimes you get those knots in your line when you're throwing a spinning reel. It happens to all of us. But that's the main reason I changed off my spinning reels, is because when you get a knot in that braid, you might as well cut it. You're not going to get that knot out. With mono or with copolymer or fluorocarbon, you can get the knot out sometimes, or sometimes you can lightly pull and it'll come out, and you don't have to cut it. But with the braid, yeah, if you're throwing on a spinning rod, you might as well get ready to cut it if you start getting some tangles in there. It's tough on you from that aspect. Even on a bait caster, when you backlash with it, the key is don't backlash, right? But we're human, we all do. It can be tough to backlash on a backlash with the braided line. So, I use them all. If I was to say what's my favorite right now, it's this Yozuri top knot. I really like it. I'm probably throwing that on all of my spinning reels. The 3 spinning reels are lined with Yozuri top knot in 8, 10, and 14. I have a medium light, medium, and medium heavy spinning rods. Now on my 5 bait casters, I've got 2 with mono. I have 2 and 3 with copolymer right now. Typically I'll have 1 with the braid on it. I just don't have it set up because I haven't been in a place to use it. But there's a time and place for all these. But from a cost efficiency standpoint, monofilament, yeah, it's cheaper. It works. It's tough. I've caught many big bass. Biggest bass I caught in my life. 10 pounds, 4 ounces. Caught it on trilene big game 15 pound in Texas, Lake Nasworthy. And I've caught lots of big bass on this. And honestly, I've caught big bass on every one of these lines. So they all work. I think the key is making sure you check your line and making sure you don't have nicks. And it's all personal preference. We all have our favorites. I have my favorite fishing rod, fishing reel. So do you probably. But if it works for you, use it. That's the way I look at it. But I do have a lot of lines, and there's actually a couple more spools I didn't even bring up here. I do use it all, and you can probably say there's over $100 worth of fishing line here, and that would be an accurate statement. But I will tell you, I probably will go through all this fishing line by the end of the year. Because now that I have a new boat, I will be fishing all year round, and in different conditions. And about probably every 2 months, every 60 days, I will probably change my line out, depending on the conditions and what's going on. I'm fishing about 5 to 7 times a month, maybe 8 times a month. More in the spring, and in the middle of summer it slows down because it's too hot to be out there, and it'll pick up in the fall. And then lower, less in the winter time. But I'll probably change out my line every couple months. So I'll go through all this line. There will be no issues with that. But I thought I'd do something different. Talk about fishing line here. Everybody has their preference. You can pound test line. It depends on what your conditions are. I prefer 14, 15 pound when I'm on my bait caster. I prefer 8 to 10 on my spinning. I'll go heavy in heavier conditions, and I'll go lighter in lighter conditions if I need to. Some of the lakes I do fish is high pressure. One of the lakes that I do like to fish a lot is Hunting Run, and there's a lot of boats on Hunting Run every time you go out there. So sometimes having an advantage may be they can't see your fishing line. So I utilize every advantage I can get in fishing, and I'm sure that you do too. So pick your line wisely, and pick what you like, and get out there and go fishing. I think the key of it is be out there enjoying the outdoors. So this is it for this edition of Shane Flint Outdoors. Hey, if you like this channel, please subscribe, like, and share. And until next time, good luck fishing, tight lines, and good luck fishing.